Hello, welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high-performing women. Today, I am joined by Lori Marini, who is a life and wellness master coach, pathologist assistant, speaker, best-selling author, podcaster, specializing in empowering women during their healing journey after a life crisis. So much is going to impact all of our listeners, I know, from this. Many lose their purpose, and the fear of moving forward leaves them paralyzed. Coach Lori guides them through fulfilling their vision of their best life. She's a breast cancer warrior and understands firsthand what it takes to go beyond fear and find the courage to give the life you love, live the life you want to live on love on your terms. There we go. I made it through that. So Lori, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to dive into this. And I'd love to hear, it sounds like you have more to your story than the couple lines I just read there. So, I'd like to just have our listeners get to know our guests, and if you don't mind sharing a little of your journey and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, I would love to. So by education, I'm a pathologist assistant. So my entire career for the past 25 years, I've been working in the healthcare industry, supporting cancer patients. So I've studied everything you could possibly study in the cancer world, from genomics to tumor evolution, and it's really been a passion of mine. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to when I was 40 and I went to go and get a baseline mammogram, and I discovered that I had breast cancer myself. And it was something that I had done self-exams. I was in the best shape of my life. I was exercising. I was doing all, eating right, doing all the things that I knew I needed to do. And having that diagnosis just floored me. It completely changed my life. So I was very fortunate that I just happened to be working for a breast oncologist. And so my journey with treatments went very quickly. Within 2 weeks, I was in surgery, and the journey changed me. And it was one of those things that I found myself, I was fine with dealing with the physical component, going to the appointments, getting the treatments, doing what I needed to do. But I recognized that, after the therapists have left, the social workers are gone, like there wasn't really a lot of options. And I realized how overwhelmed I was by the process, even though I knew the ins and outs of a hospital. And that's when I decided, I'm like, you know what, I need to be of support for other people. And that's how I became a coach. And that's been my focus ever since. I've just been supporting people going through, mostly women over 40, going through a life crisis, and once those resources are kind of gone, I support them in really just, what do you want for your life and how do you want to get there?
Awesome. I think that's so important. Like, I haven't talked a whole lot on the show. Well, on some levels, like we all have our level of crisis, right? And, it can be cancer, it can be death, it can be of, a loved one. There's so many different things and you can probably speak into that. But I think that's an important piece, is like, as a society, we're really good at supporting on the front end, maybe. But it's like, then what? It's like, and we're done with you. And now what? So that's really cool that you feel that space.
Thank you. It's so important, because I feel like a lot of, myself included, so I definitely don't want anybody to hear that it's not me, because it's definitely me. That we get to a point where we're like, okay, I'm good, right? Like they're like, I literally was told, go live your life, you're good. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, it's kind of like when you get the green light to go and you're like, I don't know what I want to do. So, and that's why I feel like these conversations are really important, and you need to have a really open mindset to what's possible for you now.
Yeah. And especially when, like, I talk a lot on this show about kind of this idea of selfless syndrome, where we're constantly giving and giving and giving and, not taking care of ourselves. And inevitably, if you don't catch it soon enough, something like breast cancer could happen, or, something that totally alters and impacts your life. And it's almost like you have this, I don't really want to call it a blank slate, but it is, like my own journey, I hit a total wall going through a divorce and, had a wrist injury and couldn't work for 2 months, and literally like all I could do, I couldn't even change my kid's diaper. Like all I could do was sit in my couch, couldn't write, couldn't play my violin, couldn't run, like couldn't do any of the things I normally do, and think about, what
Yeah,
is it that I want? What do I want to create? And what's really cool is like we have the ability to take on a totally new possibility for our lives.
exactly. And one of the, you nailed it too when you said that a lot of people don't take care of themselves, right?
Mhm.
So it wasn't, for me, it wasn't until a couple years after that I realized that one of my major factors for being on the other side of the table was ultimately working a very high stress, fast paced job without taking care of myself as much as I needed to. And
Yeah.
so many of us just get into patterns, and it's just like what you do. I'd wake up at 5:45 so I could be at work for 6:30. I'd work until 3 o'clock. I'd work out and then, start it all over again. It was never, working a 12-hour shift was never a big deal. So I
Right.
love the fact that you brought that up, because everyone has their own version of that. So it's really good to do some, self-exploration and looking within to see how are things really impacting you.
Yeah. And I think so many, we're so disconnected from ourselves,
Mhm.
like from each other too, but really from ourselves. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I know for me, like I didn't really, it's hard to slow down long enough to say,
Yeah.
oh, this is how this is affecting me. Like, hindsight is 2020 in a lot of ways. And so I'm wondering if
Absolutely.
we can, share some insight. Like a lot of what I try to
Mhm.
do with the show is just get you to slow down and think a lot. But
Yeah.
what tools and resources do you have kind of coming out of that, or before, is there stuff you wish you'd known before it had happened so that you could have maybe not like we want to focus on the past or have regret or anything, but like knowing what you know now, is there
Mhm.
something you would have done differently? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, I thought I was doing all the right things. I was eating right, I was exercising, I always made sure that um, I was doing yoga. Like I thought I was doing it okay, but what I didn't manage was my emotional component. I didn't handle the stress, right? Like I am a self-proclaimed people pleaser, and working in the healthcare industry, knowing that
Mhm.
every day you impact people's lives and how they're going to be, like it's kind of a really bad balance, because it had me um always want to do more, right? Like I treated every every patient like it was my own family, like it was my mom. So if that meant I had to work longer and foregoes the gym or forego eating, right? Anyone who works in healthcare, you can't
Right.
even take a bio break because it's just so hectic. And I think I would have probably handled that a little differently, like not take things as personal, especially when it came to interpersonal relationships, right? Like we're such givers, I feel, as
Mhm.
women, that it was kind of like we want to do good and we want to do right
Right.
by people. So when we don't have that done to us, we take it really personally. And I think I wish I would have recognized that sooner, that it's not personal at all. It's just people being people.
Yeah. I've had a lot of interesting conversations with women around, especially with the holiday, like, because we're recording this, it'll be out in the new year, but recording this around the holidays. And it's like,
Exactly.
women who are not eating sugar with like family members showing up with pies and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And like, we make it this huge deal, like, oh my gosh, I can't say no, but I'm not eating that. And that's going to be my house. And this one of my clients was like, yeah, my husband answered the door and he was just like, oh, thanks, but we're not eating that right now. And like closed the door and didn't take the pie. And it's not a big deal, right? And
Right.
so, we have all this kind of, and I think it's just, it's partly just being a female, but it's like we have all this extra stuff we have to work through, and we have to really find that balance of where we come, because when we don't, there are negative outcomes. And I think your story really, illustrates and
Yeah.
points to that.
Whew. It was definitely something that I didn't want to go through. I would never wish it upon anybody else. But the silver lining is, having that's the hit on the head. This is how I like to describe it, is that that's the hit on the head that I needed in order to start putting myself first. And so when people are like, why me? I'm like, well, that's just what you needed in order to get redirected, to get on the path that you needed. The universe will continue to give you challenges until you are flowing with it. And I'm a firm believer of that. And for me, I needed a really big hit over the head in order to make that happen.
And sometimes it takes more than one. We have these patterns are really ingrained in us. I know I've seen, like, I had my own version of a hit, and kind of, I liken it to, like, the emergency stop button on a treadmill, and it's like you fall off, and that sucks. But, and a lot of times, even in recognizing that, as we build something new, we still try to go back to our old patterns and old ways of, doing things that don't lead to anything good.
Exactly. And that's why mindset is so important, right? You need to recognize that you're in that pattern, and then look at the payoff, and then look at the reward, right? Like, so what are you getting out of it? Like, what's the benefit? Is it to feel good? Is it, whatever your version of that is? But then also look at what the cost of it is. Like, what are you sacrificing in order to have that? And repeating that pattern over and over again, because there's always both.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing to look at, especially with, addictions or certain things. I've worked with women who can't put down the Diet Coke. Like, they just, that's just ingrained in them. But there's always a cost, but there's also always some sort of payoff. There's, something that we're getting, and whatever that thing is what we have to identify, because that's what keeps driving that.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So we've got, like, for our listeners, maybe you haven't come up against the thing that's going to wake you up. I call it, get woke, whatever you want to say. Aging myself a little there. Or maybe you have. Like, where do we start in kind of recalibrating ourselves to be more conscious of the emotional side of things? Because part of your story, I mean, with what you shared, you were what I'd call the picture of health, what we define health is in our country, right? It's like, I look good, I feel good, I exercise, I eat well, but that's not the whole piece, and that's not the whole thing. And we have to, most of us are ignoring that emotional component. So with your clients or your experience, and I know you have a book and stuff too, but where do we begin this journey?
Honestly, first and foremost is just listening to the thoughts in your head. Like, what are you saying to yourself? What keeps coming up for you? What do you keep noticing that you don't want to notice? A lot of the times it's stuff that we are afraid to acknowledge, right? So part of, so I also teach at a coaching school. And one of the things that I tell my students is, like, when somebody is telling you, I don't know, there's two reasons. They either really don't know, they don't know how to move themselves forward, or the I don't know is the I don't want to deal with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So that's first battle. That's battle number one. Like, just really being okay with discovering the parts of you that you may be ashamed of, you may not like as much, you may, have a negative feeling around. Like, it's okay. Part of our growth comes with recognizing, like, hey, I was a jerk. Right. And now I get to change it. Right. Like, we've all been a jerk at some point in time. We all have our regrets and things that we're ashamed of, but we only can grow by really being truthful to ourselves and looking inwards in every aspect. So whether that's the way you eat versus the way you interact with people in your life, it's all the same, because how you treat your mailman is how you treat your neighbors, how you treat your boss, right? It's all connected. And so that's what I usually tell people is, like, what comes up for you? Like, in that moment when you're, getting angry about something, well, are you angry about what's actually happening to you? Or is there a story that's attached to it? Like, what's happening? Is it a past experience that keeps coming up for you? Or is it, a disappointment that you're currently feeling? And I think that is first and foremost the best way to start. And then once you're okay with, like, recognizing, that you can be a jerk, it could be your fault, it could be something that is beyond your control. Once you recognize that it's not personal, and it doesn't mean that you're a terrible human being, and I'm speaking from myself, right? Like, that's how I had it attached, that if I wasn't perfect with everybody, then that means I'm not perfect and there's something wrong with me, right? That was my translation. So until I got to the point that I'm like, oh, I'm just human, and I reacted this way to that, right? It doesn't mean that I should just give up, right? It just means that it's an area to look at as to like, why did I respond that way? Like, why did I react that way? Why does that impact me? And that's really the areas for growth.
Yeah. And I think it's important just to point out, I mean, I mention it like on every episode now, but there's some part of like being curious, right? Like stepping back and being more of an observer. I've been sharing on the show, I'm working through a PhD in integrative and natural medicine. And so, I'm getting exposed to all these different things, which are awesome.
Yes.
But what I completed this weekend was learning about neuro-linguistic programming, which is a form of coaching. But it's like really getting into the power of our language, right? And the things
Definitely.
that we delete or distort or, do weird things with. And kind of the first step with that is we also can't find any solution when we're stuck in the mud. Like,
Right.
we're kind of just like drowning in the stuff. And so being able to, well, you have to physically like do it and show like, this is me, I'm leaving me back here and I'm stepping forward and stepping out, or, just somehow separating yourself to have that power of observation is key. So
Yeah. And I love that. That's so powerful. And I love that you're doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I do too. I took like a year off to, figure out if I really wanted to do it, but it's like really cool. So I do. I really just want to learn it. Awesome. So we have that, becoming aware, I guess, of our language and of our stories. And I've talked about and shared about and posted about, and, in any area of our life, we can have these stories that are running and essentially are running us. And
Yeah.
a lot of them are really disempowering because they're from whatever happened. So once you recognize that, like, do you have any tips or tricks or things for kind of moving into and creating something new from that? Like not wallowing in self-pity and despair around whatever your story has been.
Yeah. And I love this question so much because first and foremost, it's like I said, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace that you are human, that you're not going to be perfect, that you're going to make some people mad. You're going to make yourself mad sometimes.
Yeah.
And the thing too is that then the second step is exactly what you said. Okay, so I respond this way to that. So you have two choices. You could either heal yourself for whatever's making you respond in a negative way towards something, and then you get to choose, do I want to engage in this anymore or do I not? Right? And that's either relation, I'm going to tell you a little story that might resonate with people. But so I am a PA by education. I've worked in the field forever. When I was going through my own treatments at a cancer center, I was still having to work. And it was one of those things that I was trying to heal myself as I was trying to be supportive of other metastatic cancer patients. And it just didn't align.
No.
And a lot of people would say to, a lot of people might think, well, what's the big deal? Well, if I'm trying to heal myself and the being that I am, but that profession, right, being in that moment, I have to be generous with other people because it's you're a giver in that position. It didn't work. And so I found myself crying on the elevator in between patients. Like it was just a disaster for me personally. And then I had to be there, like, I can't keep doing this. And it was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, where I was like, I need an alternative. I need to do something else. So I ended up transitioning into working in the biotech world. So I'm still in the game of cancer. However, I'm not at the front lines anymore. And that's what allowed me to heal a lot faster. But I struggled with the decision for over 2 years before I was like, okay, I'm not in that healthcare setting anymore, like in the weeds with everybody and being a support for people, even though I am supporting people. But part of my identity was so wrapped up in what I was doing for people that I couldn't be okay with walking away from it. And I was like, the way that I was able to rationalize it was that I'm like, you know what? I could always come back. But now that I've been out and now that I've healed, it'll take a really special moment for me to actually go back into that high stress, fast-paced environment that I was in. But, it's one of those things that we feel attached to a lot of what we have going on. And we need to be able to allow that release. like, if you love it and you want to stay with it, then take it for everything that it is and everything that it isn't, right? The good and the bad.
Yeah.
But if there's another alternative for you, then just stay open to the conversation and something will show up.
Yeah. I have a very similar journey because I was originally a chiropractor. And so I just
Okay.
completely retired,
Yeah.
earlier this year after I loved so many things about it, but it also tore my wrist up and I had
Yeah.
surgery and it retore a year later. So, and that decision, it's a challenging, and I'm not trying to tell anybody it's not, because a lot of the women I work with and who I know listen to the show are dealing with, recognizing you're in a career or doing something with your life that is not really serving you and is probably keeping you stuck and keeping you, not feeling well and messing up your hormones and setting you on the path towards wherever you're headed. And not like there's anything bad or wrong with it. It's just incredibly hard to practice self-care when you're derailed at every turn, just by the nature of the beast. And so, I'm about 6 months outside of having fully retired, and not, I will always have a place in my heart for that. And I love the profession and love everything about it, but I know that that is not what I am meant to do. And I'm like really clear on that now, and really loving, just what I'm getting to move into and create. So I just wanted to, we all have those moments and those stories. And part of why I talk about it, and probably why you share it, like a lot of us will stay stuck for a long time, not making that decision and not trusting to just jump, and or failing miserably at recreating our identity, which is something I struggled with for a lot of years.
And the other thing too is that you have a choice.
Yeah.
Right. The power of choice is so powerful, for the fact that if you choose to stay wherever you are, then you have to choose, that you're going to have your coworker who annoys you. You're going to need to be working these hours. You're not going to have this flexibility, right? The good and the bad. And then you also, so you choose either to stay or you choose to go.
Yeah.
But where we get in trouble is when we're in the limbo, right? Like we kind of halfway, I'm going to halfway choose to start exercising. Right. And you go one day and then you don't go for another 3 weeks. That's a half of a choice, right? That's not, it's not fully committing. So that's, and that's the whole thing. It's like, you got to recognize, okay, so, let's talk about professions. Okay. So I chose this profession 20 years ago. Is that who I am today? Like, who am I today? What have your life experiences, how have they changed you? Who do you want to be? Right. And once you start really asking yourself those questions, then you get to really see what works for you and what doesn't. And then you have a choice to whether or not you want to continue.
Yeah. And I think that, the idea of choice is one that eludes so many of us, but that really what it is. And when you can step back and really just say, like, I choose this or I choose this. It's like, I was part of a personal, I've shared this story before, but a personal growth and development kind of training, and they called me up in front of like 300 people and had me do this choice exercise. And so it was like,
is
chocolate
it the
or vanilla?
chocolate or vanilla?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Are
know
you
that one
familiar with
too.
Landmark? Yeah.
I am. Yeah.
That's
how I started my journey, for sure.
Awesome. Me too, actually. Anyways, so I did that whole process. And for those listeners, it's like, we want to justify it. It's like, well, I choose chocolate because it tastes better and it's just better than vanilla and blah, blah, blah. And like, we miss the whole point. We don't have to justify anything. We don't have to explain it. You just make a choice. You don't have to defend it. And like, when you do that, there's so much freedom inside of there, like with relationships, with your job, with your, commitments, whatever it is. It's like, you just choose it, or you choose not to, and it's not a big deal.
Right.
And that's like, and we hype it up to be such this big deal in our minds, and that is part of, where we let go of the stress and of all the story and stuff and all that. And
it's like the husband accepting or not accepting the pie at the front door.
Yeah.
It didn't mean anything. He just chose not to take it.
Yeah.
Right.
It really doesn't mean anything.
Right. Exactly.
So, cool. That's really powerful and profound. And for those listening, like, if you can really get this, there's so much freedom that really just comes on the other side of it in a huge way. So cool.
And the other thing too that I would love for people to really sit in right? And just be with it is gratitude. Everybody talks about it. It's the buzzword, right? Gratitude, gratitude. But like, it's like gratitude, like true gratitude, not the watered down version, right? Because when you are at the crossroads and you have to make a choice, a powerful choice, right? Gratitude definitely plays a role in that too, for the fact that, so many people, if you could recognize the good in your life and what there truly is to be thankful for, especially now that we just went through Thanksgiving, right? And we've all had the good and the bad of the holiday. Gratitude is such a amazing practice if you actually do it for gratitude. And I don't know if that resonates with people, but it's one of those things that like every morning. So throughout my journey of healing, I would take a picture every day as I would go through my life, like, oh, this is moves me, this inspires me, this is beautiful. And I would have a list, I'd have 20 pictures by the time my day was done. And I would go through and I would look to see which picture resonated with me the most. And then I would write a post on it on Instagram. And what I was doing at the time that I didn't really recognize that I was doing, I just knew that I needed to look for the good in life, right? Because I was having such a hard time with everything I was dealing with that was just not good. Facing your own mortality is not fun. Divorce is the same because you're like, what am I going to do, right? Like, it's none of that process is fun, but you have to look for the beauty in life. And in the moment, I wasn't even realizing that I was retraining my brain to always look for the positive side, to always look for the beauty. And there's things that happen in life that are so hard to find the good in, right? And so for me, like my practice is 5 minutes of gratitude every day. I also wake up every morning and I look to the love of my life and I look at him and I'm like, we made it through the night. I'm so thankful for another day. And it's just how to start the day with, when you're just grateful for being and everything that you have, when stuff really piles on that's negative, you can still have some control over it too. And I hate using the word control, but I hope that resonates for people that we still have a choice of how we're going to react to stuff.
Yeah, I have the same issue with the word control, but sometimes it just applies. And, and what you share is so powerful because especially like when we're talking about, serious illness or some of the like really horrible stuff that happens, like I don't pay attention to the news because I will get really depressed. And it's affecting our energy and actually impacting, the frequency that our body vibrates at. And so as you were going through your healing journey, focusing on those good thoughts, the happy thoughts, like they've done studies with plants and various things around, how this works, but you're feeding yourself in a way that your vibrational frequency will raise, which ultimately allows you to heal. So for those listening, like this isn't just, it's good on multiple levels, we'll put it that way.
And what was really fascinating for me for my journey was that I go inward. And I am such an extrovert. However, when times get really rough for me, I go inward to the point that I was not talking to people. And so, especially if that's you, if that resonates with you, where you're not in contact with a lot of people, where you've kind of isolated yourself, and we all do it, it's okay. But just know, like, don't live there, right? Like you want to eventually come out of there. But having that gratitude and looking for that positivity will get you out of that much faster.
It will. Yeah. It's rewiring on so many levels. And, some days it can be really hard to find the thing you're grateful for. But there's always something.
Always something. I am grateful for my warm cup of honey and lemon, right? Like it's just start kind of enjoying every moment, taking it slower, and just really being present, really is what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I feel like we could probably keep going on multiple levels, but we'll keep this to bite-sized nuggets. So how can women, connect with you, get more Lori. I know you're in a few places, it looks like.
Oh, thank you so much. So
Yeah.
all of my information is available on my website, which is just my name, lorimarini.com. And for those of you interested, there is a free download PDF of my personal 10 daily habits to wellness that I use throughout my own crisis, that I hope will resonate with those listening.
Awesome. And I'll put links to all that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for coming on and, sharing your journey and your wisdom. It's been great. So
This is amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody listening.
absolutely.